Thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate the recording. So we are recording this. For those who can't join us in person, we'll be posting this to the IIIF Consortium YouTube channel as soon as the recording is ready. But let me step back a second. I'll introduce myself. My name is Josh Hadro. I'm the Managing Director of the IIIF Consortium. We are here today to talk about a really exciting project. We'll get into the details of some really cool work we've been doing with the staffers over at the Internet Archive, as well as a number of the IIIF community members who kind of helped make this project work. But I'll also step back a step and say this is a regular IIIF community call. We do these usually about 10 times a year on different topics. So project work like this from within the community, or different implementations, or sometimes just some discussion items like annotations and other mechanisms that are of use to the IIIF world and community. So if this is your first time joining a IIIF call, welcome. We hope you find it interesting. We hope you join us. We hope you will join us for future instances of this call. I will paste the notes and agenda doc one more time into the chat here. It's really helpful if you can sign in there. It gives us a sense of who joins these and who finds the various topics of interest. We also have an agenda. So the first item there is a call for note taker. We generally do a request if somebody would be willing to take lightweight notes. Any takers for today?
Gosh, I'll take some notes, but I would appreciate it if someone tried to help me out.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, obligatory pause. I appreciate that. So Caitlin will take lead there, and then if other folks can backfill as they can. So the other item on our agenda before we get to the substance of the call today is just a space for announcements. The first one, I'll hand it over to Caitlin just to talk about some of the upcoming events and conference work. But if there are other announcements from the community, we'll open the floor in just a moment. So Caitlin, you're first.
Hi all, I am Caitlin Perry. I'm the Communications and Community Coordinator here at IIIFC. And if you made your way to this meeting, you have probably also heard me remind you that the call for proposals for our online meeting closes on Friday. So our online meeting, which is a companion to our in-person meeting, will be happening the 5th through the 7th of December. This year, we are looking for lightning talks on new implementations, implementations outside of the US and Europe, all sorts of different interesting topics, as well as trainings or workshop style sessions where people can get some hands-on instruction on tools or topics related to IIIF. So the form is really lightweight. It is really easy to submit. You can send in your idea and you'll still have plenty of time to think through what that will actually look like if it is accepted. So again, the call for proposals, the link is in there and it closes the end of this week, Friday.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin. Any other announcements, events, anything else of interest to the IIIF community? I'll open the floor if there's anything anybody wants to mention. All right. Wait one more moment. Okay. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. I'm really happy to see all these folks interested in this work. I'm very excited about it. We have a bunch of folks who are going to talk about different aspects of this community and Internet Archive partnership. But yeah, so what I will do is share my screen. I'm going to drive some slides here, but we will have the opportunity to hear from many, many more people than just myself. So let me make sure this is working. Could I get a thumbs up just to make sure that this seems like it's working?
Looks good.
Great.
Same
Thank
screen,
you.
yeah.
All right. Perfect. Then let me put this over here. Okay. So as you saw, what brought you here is this topic of making it official. So the IIIF and the Internet Archive partnership. So what we'll do is we'll talk about some of the background first, and then we'll get into some of the details and show off some examples. And there's lots more to come with this project. This is kind of the debut of a minimum viable project. But there's a lot more work and development we can do, and we're looking for feedback from the community about directions we can take this. So we'll get started here with some of the project background. And to do this, first I'd like to introduce Mek from the Open Library and the Internet Archive, who really predates me by a long shot in driving this initial connection. So Mek, I'll hand it over to you if you want to take us through a little bit of the background and how you helped kind of found the beginnings of this partnership.
Sure, I'm happy to. Josh, thank you so much for your hard work, and thank you everyone for being so welcoming and inviting and creating a space for scholars to have interoperability with images. I see a lot of familiar faces, Tom and others who I've had a chance to speak with over the years, so very happy to be here. And maybe I'd like to talk about this service in that historical context. When I first started working on this thing called the Archive Labs IIIF API, I was a volunteer with the Internet Archive. I was not an employee, and I just noticed that the Internet Archive played a really special role in my community of having storage that it felt underutilized. People were not talking about public APIs. It was actually quite hard to document and uncover where all of these APIs lived. And so I had a few different goals for creating a volunteer instance. One was, it's just fun to sling code sometimes. And so I ended up not only implementing the manifest layer archive lab service, but actually wrote a IIIF2 core Python library to do all the image processing. So prior to Cantaloupe, this was just this crufty ad hoc Python library that many of you are probably disappointed that the Internet Archive current IIIF service doesn't have a lot of things like great rotation support or whatever it is. So that was kind of the historical context of, wouldn't it be great if we were able to take millions of images that already existed online and provide a path forward to make these things IIIF compatible. And this was also during a time when I'm going to use discovery in a way that's kind of different from how discovery API tends to be used in the IIIF community. Something that I really cared about early on in IIIF's history is like how we can literally discover each other's organizations' endpoints and catalogs. How can we make it so that everyone is presenting a catalog in the same way? That's one reason why in the past, when you go to IIIF.archivelab.org, the first thing it does is just gives you a JSON dump of all of the items that are available at the Internet Archive. I just wanted to make it machine discoverable what the catalog is. So jump to today, we've had some 15 to 20 organizations that seem like they've been making good usage of our services. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we've gotten from organizations using this experimental service for their grants, for production efforts at organizations like the University of Texas, is, when is this thing going to be official? Like, is this a toy? Is this thing going to flop over? Is it fully supported? Is it compliant with all the latest APIs? And fortunately, I was able to meet Josh and Glen and Mike and Sara and Ben and the rest of the IIIF community, who has been so gracious in helping us explore how we might be able to take this experimental lab service and turn it into something that is really going to serve the needs of the broader IIIF community and other researchers as well. So with that intro in place, the last thing I would like to do just upfront is to make it clear, this was a fun thing to push forward, but in terms of the recent efforts, Mike and Glen and Josh and Sara and Ben and Rob Kaiser at the Internet Archive and Trini, Cami, and others have just done a phenomenal job of making this a reality. So I would like to step back from any accolades and just say I was kind of in the right place at the right time experimenting. But y'all really owe it to your colleagues who have volunteered their time to do some really amazing things on behalf of the whole community. So I just want to express my gratitude for these people who have spent many weeks on community calls on their own time serving us. So thank you to all of you.
Great. Thanks, Mac. I thanked you once before, but I was muted, so I'll do it again. And yeah, and to you as well. I mean, so the next step here, this is kind of a nice transition to kind of where we are today. So Mac mentioned this, that I think over the years, different institutions had been in touch with different people involved with that experimental service, and we as IIIF Consortium staff had heard similar kinds of inquiries and questions, and so that really led to a formal proposal that the IIIF Consortium staff worked on in late 2022. So the end of last year, we kind of synthesized a lot of the feedback that we'd gotten and really presented to Mac and the other folks at the Internet Archive a proposal to say, hey, this could be something really great. This could really align with the goals of both institutions, and really we could make this a really flagship implementation of the latest and greatest elements of the IIIF specification work. So that proposal was extremely well received, and it led to this work and this call today. So the main goals that we highlighted were, as Mac mentioned, making it official infrastructure, just making it something that people could rely on. So not having that labs element in the name or the URL structure, making it part of the same underlying infrastructure that people rely on in terms of all the Internet Archive offerings. And that comes with some of just the technical nitty-gritty about certification renewals and making sure that everything's kind of running all the time as expected. And part of this work too is we knew that we could implement some of the really great work that's happened in the 8 years since Mac originally did some of that work on the image server side, so making it speedier and more responsive. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a minute. Yeah, I mentioned this, more reliability for external partners, something that people can build into their workflows and can work with their staff and scholars and communities to incorporate into their different projects. And something that's really exciting that I will highlight a little bit later in the call is the ability to make use of the capabilities in the 3.0 version of the IIIF presentation API, which means that we can create manifests and presentation mechanisms for audio and video materials. So obviously still valuing the image and text work that's there, but adding a huge amount of AV assets into the mix here. And so with that, this is essentially our goal set in terms of the amounts that we're talking about. So at the highest level, we are eager to try and figure out how to make manifests for approximately all those Internet Archive items. Now, of course, there's almost literally everything under the sun exists in some form or another in terms of file types on the Internet Archive. And so there's amazing things in terms of software emulation and others that maybe we haven't quite cracked yet in terms of IIIF manifests. But the focus really is there at the bottom, having manifests that express and make available all of those 41 million books and text items, the 4.4 million image items, as well as the audio recordings, 14.7 million audio recordings and 8.4 million different video recordings. So as I said, there are a lot of edge cases and file types, and we're eager for feedback in terms of how this new system works. There are still occasionally new video format containers that I'm running across that don't necessarily work, but in broad strokes, we have the ability to generate manifests for all these different things. And I mentioned this, that we're taking advantage of this opportunity to do it according to the 3.0 version of the IIIF specs, but we are maintaining the ability to be backwards compatible for those folks who have built, say, tooling or annotation mechanisms or other things that expect 2.1 manifest. So we're aware of that, we're acknowledging that, but by default, this will be a 3.0 project. So to get into a bit of more of the detail, maybe on the technical side, first I'm going to hand this to Glen into some of the image capabilities.
Great, thanks, Josh. So I'm going to talk about the work we did for the image API. And we did end up replacing the IIIF Python image server. I think you're a bit harsh on it, Mech. I think the code has been great, and we've used it a lot in the IIIF training. So every time we do the IIIF training, we use the Internet Archive as a way to give access to people to IIIF images. And it's worked really well for that. You know, it's kind of a very easy to use system where you can upload an image and then suddenly you have this kind of IIIF image URL. But what we were really looking for in this kind of migration work was to look at supporting version 3. And it was easier to kind of choose an off-the-shelf image server. And the Internet Archive decided to go for Cantaloupe. And I'm really pleased to say that we didn't have to do any changes to Cantaloupe at all. It was just completely off the shelf. And it connects to the download link in the Internet Archive. So the first time you make an image request to Cantaloupe, it goes to goes and downloads the images, and then it caches it, and so all your subsequent responses are really quick. So it's really, really easy to integrate Cantaloupe. Part of the work we did was to thoroughly load test it. So we wanted to make sure that as soon as we went live, it was able to cope with the amount of load that we were putting through. And so we developed a load tester, and you're welcome to kind of download it. It's available on GitHub. And this, you point at an image server, you give it some IDs, and then you select the amount of users you want to test with, and then it just kind of randomly goes through and selects tiles and large images. And so you can find out when your kind of image service starts to code. So that's kind of built on the HTJ2K testing that we've done previously. So we've got this Cantaloupe set up, it's integrated into the manifests, and it's working really well. So we're looking forward to that. Supports version 3 and version 2, and Cantaloupe supports all of the different kind of image processing, rotation stuff that you'd want. So that's the image side. I'm now going to pass on to Mike, who's going to take us through the presentation side of the development.
Thanks, Glenn. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to talk very briefly just a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes in terms of the manifests. So as was mentioned at the top there, there's been this kind of experimental labs service version 2 IIIF presentation, IIIF manifest for quite a long time. And this was an existing Flask application called, I don't know, IIIFE. I never worked out how you're supposed to pronounce that one. And this was doing the things that I think many of us have done previously, which was sort of hand constructing the JSON file before returning. And to use the IIIF Prezi 3 library, those of you who were at the conference earlier this year, or in the sort of winter meeting last year will have seen me present on this. So this is a Python library developed by Glen and myself and a few other volunteers over the last few years that is, I guess, almost like a reference implementation of the Presentation 3 API in Python, in that it allows you to easily build constructs for all of the Presentation 3 objects. So our main work with the Internet Archive has been to kind of take out the sort of old hand-built JSON and replace it with the use of this Prezi 3 library to generate the Presentation v3 manifests. So under the hood, actually, the Internet Archive has a lot of fantastic APIs which have all the information you could need on any item. So for us, actually, it made the development quite easy. A lot of the code is calling an Internet Archive API to say, hey, I have this identifier, I would like to retrieve the metadata for it, please. Retrieving that and then feeding it into Prezi 3 and then saying, hey, now please return this as JSON. So it's been really nice for us in terms of the ability to quickly spin things up. and to extend the functionality a lot. So the nice thing about Prezi 3 library is that it covers everything that's currently in the validator JSON schema, which is what it's built around. So this means that as well as just having the kind of simple manifest of here's your manifest, here are some canvases with images or other things on them. As Josh mentioned, we've been able to extend that to AV manifests, but we've also been able to fill out lots of extra data. So we have, for example, all of the metadata that comes from the Internet Archive when people upload items. This is included in the manifests. We have sort of links to the item. We have a really fleshed out manifest using as many of the features as possible, with the hope that this can kind of become like a really good resource for saying, here are some really rich manifests that contain a lot of the functionality available in Presentation 3. And obviously on top of this, we have still the support for version 2, using the sort of existing code that was there. But our main work, like I said, has been to write this first Presentation 3 layer on the top. And yeah, I think that we've added, I hope, quite a lot of value to the sort of simple IIIF use of just presenting resources by wrapping as much as we could using the Prezi 3 library. So I think now I'm going to hand over to Sara and Ben from the page, who are going to talk to you about some of the things we've added on top of the basic usage. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Right, so as Mike mentioned, we tried to take the existing functionality that supported images and texts in the Archives Lab implementation, and beef them up, make them richer by pulling in and modeling a lot of the information about metadata and other things that the Internet Archive items have. So we're up to feature parity, and those manifests are a lot richer in terms of richness of items that were previously available. We've also added support for new kinds of items, that's AV manifests. So those support all the metadata and all the things you'd expect. There is something that we should call out here, though. The Internet Archive has a really sophisticated derivation process. When you upload any kind of image or audio file or video file, it will create multiple different kinds of derivatives from that. So an audio file that you upload as a wave, for example, you might end up with an MP3 and an ogg verbose. So how do we model that? There is a recipe that's supported by the IIIF v3 spec that involves using a choice property in the list of files. So instead of saying this canvas has a painting annotation that has this audio file, you can have a choice that lists multiple different kinds of files, and we used that to communicate all those different derivatives. This may be a challenge for some viewers. Some already support it. Some may need to go make sure that choice actually works. Josh has been busy opening issues in different viewers back and forth. We also added support for collection manifests. And there's a caveat there as well. In the Internet Archive, collections can be very, very large. You can have collections that have hundreds of thousands of items. So how do we support this using IIIF collections? What we ended up doing was doing kind of a pagination model in which a collection will have a list of items that are direct links to manifests, followed by a list of one or two, depending on what page you're on, other collections that are part of the same collection, so that people can paginate through collections in user interfaces. I do think there may be a limit of about 10,000 items based on what the Internet Archive API is willing to feed us. The team also worked on doing backward compatibility for version 2 and version 3. By default, IIIF.archive.org is going to serve version 3 manifests, but with a URL change, you can also access version 2 manifests by adding a version number to your manifest. There is an additional bit of work on backward compatibility that was done so that the Archive Labs version of the presentation API defaults to version 2, because we did not want to switch anyone who is using existing manifests from one version to another. Now, I think the next presenter is Josh.
Indeed. Yeah. So I get to do a really fun part, which is, we wanted to give you a lot of information. We are going to mostly, I think, spare you looking at any JSON, but I think, we wanted to look at some examples, actually give you some views into some of the cool items and, just examples of different functionality that we can take you through here. So let's do that. This first one is really neat, and I'll actually do it in slides, but the other ones I'll click through. So this is a very recent image from the Hubble Space Telescope, so joint operation between NASA and the European Space Agency. And this is, I believe, the clearest image yet taken of the Andromeda Galaxy. And so this is an ultra high resolution image. You can imagine, just the size and complexity of this image. And there's just an incredible amount of detail that you can't see when you're looking at that overall image. And this is an example. So just this insane number of stars in this star field and this, this really close in shot. So if you've worked with IIIF for a long time, this is obviously not radical new functionality, but it's kind of just a beautiful way. So here I'll click through to these items to demonstrate that, from an item page, and you can see how this item, takes quite a while to load, but from this item page on the Internet Archive to just a URL-based, very fast, responsive view into this little detail of that image. And I'll actually stop this loading while I talk about some of these others. But similar functionality, just here's an example that I'm sure everyone on this call has run up against in your own digital collections and on the Internet Archive. So you open up an item and you get this, this kind of, often brown or pale gray cloth of a bound text item. And so what this does is it's really kind of almost the least appealing possible way to introduce people to what are amazing historical text. This is a botanical, a book of botanical illustrations of plants and elements from Australia. So it's 1,000 pages long and has all these amazing plates and details in it. And so obviously with IIIF, you can give somebody, right, a very direct citable URL to that beauty and complexity. And if, here I've just cropped it directly, but as if you've worked with IIIF, you can give the full book plate just by manipulating the URL simply like that. So some other examples, getting into individual items. So here's just a beautiful photo. This is actually from our own Glen Robson. Took this photo from the Butchart Gardens in Victoria, Canada. So we can open it up in the beautiful Clover viewer. Developed by a number of IIIF community folks in the last couple years. Getting into a little bit more complexity, so books and texts. So one of the many amazing historical items on the Internet Archive, this comes from the collections of Columbia University. They're one of the places that has made great use of the Internet Archive to host materials and texts. So this is kind of this beautiful illustrated guide to my local city, so to New York, but I'll show it to you in the Mirador viewer. So if we can open it up here, functionality you'd expect, but you can actually take that page view and really get into the depth of these beautiful illustrations. As if you're familiar with Mirador, you can get this multi-page view and do the same thing. Just really speedily get into this view of Lower Broadway and the financial district. So. Then getting into some exciting options for audio and video. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity to highlight a Grateful Dead playlist. Internet Archive has so much amazing recorded audio from the community of folks who for a long time have been collecting these recordings and sharing them. We can we can play those through a IIIF player. So this example is of the ramp IIIF media player coming from the folks at Indiana. So I'll play this. The audio should come through, but please tell me if you don't hear anything. And as much as I would like to share with you that 4 CD set or that recording of dozens of Grateful Dead tracks, we want to make time for questions. So here's an example of moving image material. So this is a recording of a talk about IIIF from a community member, Leander Saiga, but we can open that up in the universal viewer. And I'm just showing these examples in individual viewers, but of course, part of the promise of IIIF is that you can use any of these compatible viewers to make these work. So.
Die Metadaten abgelegt sind. Zunächst gibt es da die Kollektionen.
So there you go. You get the sense, and as usual with the UV, all this material and data that's built into the manifest is available here in the sidebar. I didn't show that in Clover. Same idea. All of this is coming from the metadata that we were able to link into the IIIF manifests. And so one more piece of functionality that I'm pretty excited about is what Ben mentioned earlier, is the ability to create collection manifests. So here is an example of a collection. I chose one. Ben mentioned that there are some extremely large collections on the Internet Archive that are just amazing in their breadth and depth. I chose a smaller one just for this demo purpose. So also going with the video and space theme that we were looking at a lot. This is a set of videos from the Jet Propulsion Lab and some of their kind of public public presentation and science communications videos. So here's what the collection page looks like on the Internet Archive. And here's what it looks like in the Mirador viewer, which can handle collection presentations. So if we say, choose this first item, the camera that saved Hubble, we can play this item.
Hubble is all about imagery.
So kind of a nice way to highlight AV capabilities built into Mirador.
The light all comes together in a single.
And Mirador has kind of a nice way to allow navigation of these collection materials over here. So we can choose the next item here, going for a spin. You get the sense there. So really nice way of combining both collection functionality as well as the AV functionality that we were working on. So I am going to pause there and we can, if folks are interested in other examples, you can put them in the questions. But for now, some of the upcoming work, I'm going to hand it back over to Sara and Ben.
So like all projects, there's more that we'd like to do, and the team continues to meet and work on a weekly basis. So we need to document all the official routes so folks know what's available and how to use them. We're exploring how to model and use even more of the Internet Archive's derivatives and manifests, including thumbnails, audio waveforms, and preview images for video files as placeholders. That's a capital P placeholder in the spec. We're in the middle of adding OCR data into manifests, and we'll explore how to add caption files for videos into manifests as well. The Internet Archive has a lot of right to left text, so we're going to add paging direction to items. And as Josh said earlier, we're curious what else you'd like to see.
Thanks, Sara. And that is basically a good lead into the remainder of the hour. We wanted to demo these items and talk about the work, but we also really want to talk with you all about what work you want to see and how we can kind of help support the best set of use cases. Before we get into the Q&A for that question and others, Mech did a great job. I just want to reiterate the gratitude Oh, and of course, there we go. There is text on the slide. So a huge number of people made this work. It really is a beautiful representation to me of the best of the IIIF community. So folks, volunteers, as well as IIIF Consortium staffers, working with institutional partners at the Internet Archive. So Mech, Rob, Drini, Tracy, Brenton, on the IA side, just lots of great work, especially in the last few days to get this up and running. And on the IIIF side, yeah, you've heard from a lot of the folks really deeply involved. Mike, you know, I couldn't have done it without Mike, and you know, he really literally wrote a huge proportion of this material, but also Sara, Ben, Glen, all of us who put in a bunch of hours to review and make this all work. And I think that, yeah, so that the last thing we'll mention is nothing is perfect. There may still be issues you run into, but we are actively working on it. So we can actually put this link into the notes and the chat for later. But the best thing to do if you run into something that's not working and you think it should, please put a GitHub issue in there, and we'll be able to address that as we can. And that takes us to this we have about 20 minutes here to answer your questions. I think there have been some in the chat already, but also, yeah, to take feedback. And as Sara said, what features can we work on that would be really valuable to you? So with that, I will stop sharing. All right. And I just see the first one here. Peter mentions, can we share the link to the slides? Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put those in the meeting notes following this. But let me stop talking. Let's open the floor. Are there any, those who are monitoring, are there any questions from the chat that we should answer, or should we just open it up and let folks unmute?
I didn't see anything immediately in the chat questions wise.
I'm happy to provide a few categories of questions that I imagine if I were a partner, I would be excited to ask about. Now, I do see some hands up, so I'll keep it really short and defer to those questions. But one thing that we may be able to answer is around migration and the end of life of the Archive Lab API, how that's going to affect partners who are currently relying on the old version of this service. Some partners who might, in the past, we've been contacted by folks at Emory and other organizations about teaming up on grants, and they've had questions about long-term support and uptime and availability. So I'm happy to field those questions as well, best I can. Folks might have questions about documentation coming up or requests, and I think that also, it would be great to hear what folks' needs are. And I think we still do need people to help with beta testing. And so if you are affiliated with an organization that uses the Archive Lab API and may be interested in a little bit of courtesy hand-holding to migrate to the new service, you would also be doing us a huge favor in being able to test things out. But why don't I just leave those as classes of questions that might spark some inspiration. And Josh, not sure if you want to take the lead on calling folks.
Yeah, I see a hand from Peter. Go ahead.
Hi, this is so wonderful. I mean, this is just glorious to see this. My question, I guess, is fairly specific. I'm wondering about support for annotation, and are you thinking about conventions for annotation that other people can follow to be sure that as we all go in there and start annotating things that we end up compatible in some way? Is that on the roadmap?
I can offer some history just for fun. This is going to be useful to almost no one here. But one of the things that I built selfishly for my own purposes, this was back in maybe 2015, 2016, that I think maybe got presented in Vatican City during one of the IIIF meetups was the ability to use annotations as a way to store references across books. And so you could pull up René Descartes' La Géométrie and then also Euclid's Elements and see like a direct link between them. And in order to make that work, I stood up this service called Pragma, which had some convoluted name in terms of like annotations and references. So just like we have a Internet Archive or Archive Lab IIIF server that the community can use, we had an annotation server that was completely public and open that anyone could use. I don't know if we publicized it very well, and it's kind of just sitting around right now, half broken. But if that were of interest, like spinning up some sort of public annotation server, and we had some degree of confidence that it was going to be used responsibly and some way to ensure that, that's one thing that I could imagine us doing, is also having like a general purpose Internet Archive annotation server that the community could use.
Great. I'd like to promise on behalf of the planet that it will be used responsibly.
Thanks, Peter. There's a question from Tom Crane about scaling. How does it scale up? I guess, Glenn, that's related to some of the load testing you did, or I guess Glenn or Mech or any others want to talk about how that's handled on the IA side?
I also see Rob on the call after Glenn, who can tell us about scaling vertically across our servers.
I will defer to Rob. I didn't see him on the call, so great.
Yeah. Hi, Rob. Sorry, I didn't see you there, but
Hi.
yeah, please.
No worries. So yeah, my role is basically make shit work, simply put. Anyways, so we run a load balancer, and then we're running multiple image servers on the back end. So we're actually running currently IIIF.archive.org is running 3 instances of the API and 3 instances of the image server that work together. So we can scale those up independently. Hammer us as much as you want, but please, we're a nonprofit. Don't make a point of being like, can I break you? Because the answer is probably yes. The question becomes how much, right? So we're keeping an eye on the load, and then we're going to scale that up as we need to. But the simple answer is we've set it up so there's a load balancer coming in, then load balances across 3, and then that and in turn gets load balanced across 3 behind that. Does that answer some of the questions around the load balancing? Seems like it. Anyways, if it breaks, I will get a ping and I'll start to care. So we're starting to basically make this a service. So yeah, that's the simple answer that I can give when it comes to that. Is I'm going to start to monitor it and I'll start to fix it when it breaks and scale up the load as required. That kind of thing.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. I see there was one question in the chat about the 1-hour lending books. Matthias, you asked about that. So that's a good example of what I would call sort of an edge case. The answer is it actually generates a manifest now, but the manifest won't deliver anything because of the infrastructure on the IA side, which requires some authentication to be able to see those books. So that's an example where a manifest is generated, but it won't work maybe as you would expect. There, as Ben and Sara mentioned in the chat, there is an issue on the GitHub account. We're aware of those. They weren't the top priority. There is some idea that maybe IIIF auth could figure into that in the future, but it's honestly, we want to get the bigger use cases, the bigger open access stuff all working first. So we're aware of it. We don't have a great path forward, but the issue's there if you have suggestions. And
one reason why this is more feasible, I think, than one might assume at first glance, is the way that the Internet Archive works with authentication. It's similar to Amazon, where you can use your username and password, but if someone gets your username and password, that's usually not great. There's no way to take it back. So the way that the Internet Archive tends to work around this challenge is, in addition to having a username or an email and a password, we issue each account uniquely a pair of keys, 2 keys. And these keys, if someone happens to get them, can be redacted. And many of our APIs work by allowing you to pass in those keys as a header along with the request. And so there may be a pretty straightforward way for us to like log in once, and then the keys come back and we save that in the application. And then those keys get sent along with future requests. And that's something I'd be happy to advise on. And it's important to us that eventually we enable all of those lendable materials. Some, not even necessarily more modern. It could just be something from the 1940s that is of a lot of value that currently isn't available in the ecosystem. So I'm happy to volunteer my time as well to unlock some of those cases.
And just to add, so we briefly discussed it when we were doing the implementation, but it's a really interesting use case for the IIIF ORS specification. And potentially we had a brief discussion. We think we could make it work, so the new windows and the logging in and then returning back to the item. So there's a real potential there that it just might fit into the IIIF ORS specification. But as Josh said, we wanted to focus on getting the kind of the open stuff there first, and then maybe on to that later on.
There's also a question in the chat from Matthias about what's the general availability? In other words, when will all manifests be available for all items? Okay, so Josh pointed out that there are types of items that we don't have modeled in IIIF, right? Emulators for different types of software and the software that runs on those emulators. I mean, that we have to wait on the spec and maybe we will never get there. So I don't know that we'll ever have all items available. But I think the second half of this question is this GA and what items does it cover? So I'm going to let someone else actually answer that because I'm not sure where we are in the deployment process. But
I mean, as of right now, if you have an Internet Archive identifier and it is a digitized book, images, audio file, or video file, you should be able to get a manifest. I think we made aware today there's potentially a couple of identifiers where you get an error. Obviously, we're still working on the code. There are a lot of unique items in the Internet Archive, so we do occasionally run across things where there's an edge case we haven't handled. But I would say that for the majority of items which you can feasibly represent in IIIF, the manifests are already there. So you can just take the identifier from the Internet Archive and put it into the service and get a manifest back. So someone did ask in the chat, does it work for PDFs? I did link to an example. So again, there's an Internet Archive item, for example, with the identifier bengal-003.pdf. And if you take that identifier and you go to IIIF.archive.org/IIIF bengal-003.pdf/manifest.json, you will get a manifest back for that PDF file, which will load in a viewer.
Pretty exciting. So, and to kind of restate that, if you run into one of these items that should work and doesn't, please open an issue.
Thanks. Mac, go ahead.
Sure. So there's a few cases that I could imagine could break. One case that's kind of interesting, which might work already, I have to double check, is when an Internet Archive item actually contains a collection of documents. So for instance, most of the time when someone goes to an archive.org item, one can expect to see a single book and kind of flip through it. But there are special cases where there's huge compendiums and you go to an item and the first thing you see is like a book reader that lists out 20 books. And so the ID structure might be a little bit different for that. We can double check to make sure that that works. Another thing that I want to impress, this is like a perfect time for it. Because this is something that has been really difficult for the Internet Archive in the past. We're an organization with only so many resources. And one of the ways that we're able to achieve things like this is through collaboration with the community. And so I want to impress that this is a production service. We're trying our best to throw reliability and resourcing behind it and make it work really well. And it's also a volunteer supported project. And so the way that this is going to work moving forward is getting feedback from people in the community, understanding that even though we're putting resources and behind it and trying for high availability, that things are going to break, and that is a part of our offering. And that the way that we're going to fix it is by collaborating as a community and understanding how we might want to make tweaks to the spec, because this is a thing that is going to have to work across organizations and use cases. And the Internet Archive itself, which this project sits on top of, has its own quirks and peculiarities. So bear with us, and do anticipate that in order to get exactly what you need, there will likely be conversations that need to happen here on GitHub, and don't be afraid to open up a pull request. That would help. And I do have one little question, which is if people are willing to humor me, I'm curious if you could react with a show of hands. How many folks have either personally yourselves or your organization have taken advantage of the Archive Labs APIs, and or how many intend to implement the latest production APIs with your organizations? All right, so I see like 5 to 10. That's great. Yes to both. Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. It's helpful for us as well.
Yeah, I spotted a few thumbs up that don't also necessarily bring people up to the top of the screen. So
yeah, thanks, Meg, for that. And one additional thing I will say, just to the point of this was us kind of debuting examples and functionality and really kind of putting it out in the world so that we could get, we're already seeing examples of things that maybe don't render exactly as we intended. It's really hard to stress how much there are just an amazing number of edge cases. The amount of the ability to like nest metadata within metadata is also something that sometimes trips up the manifest generation. So that's an example we saw today. One of the last things I'll say, and I think we have time for another question or two, but there will be documentation. So this is obviously, we're not just sending it out into the world and saying good luck. There's a blog post that should be coming pretty soon that announces this more broadly and talks about it. We have the formal documentation about all these routes that will be published as part of the IIIF Internet Archive service. So this is really just the kind of the first teaser announcement. We have a lot more of that info that will be available sort of in the coming days and weeks. We have time for maybe another question if there is one out there. We've wowed everyone and answered everything to all satisfaction.
Stunned silence is a happy response.
Absolutely. Well, I'll make the offer for another minute or so if anyone has questions or details they're interested in. But in that, just as people turn the gears, I'll just reiterate one more time. We're grateful for your interest. That really sort of validates the work that a ton of people put into making this work. We're really excited about it. As we said in the hour, we're hoping that this kind of shows off the richness and depth, not just of the Internet Archive's open collections, but also of the functionality that the IIIF makes available. So to the point about annotations earlier, there's a lot of stuff that we can get into once we have this kind of baseline setup of availability for all these open materials. So just an amazing thing. So last call, any last questions or we'll call it.
I did notice, and something I would like to act upon for all of your benefit as well, is for folks who did raise their hands as having either been using the Archive Lab services or intending to use the production services, it would be really helpful if on the notes, the IIIF notes document, you'd be willing to highlight your name, either just with the yellow highlighter or with like a raised hand emoji, just so that we can connect and either reach out or coordinate and help you with that migration, because things might come up. And I think all of us are going to be more successful by keeping open dialogue. So I'm certainly happy to be a resource to make sure that you're successful in that integration or migration.
Thanks, Mech. And a last question here: is Internet Archive involved in forming the IIIF specs? In the sense that, you know, like these use cases, and the more we play with this, that will inform anything that say we need to incorporate in the 4.0 version of the specs. Yes, these use cases and the utility of this will absolutely speak to the work that the editors on the IIIF side do, but no, well, in the sense that you know, the staffers at IA are not formally IIIF editors or you know, are writing new specs, but they are absolutely part of the mix of the work, of the community work that helps us make sure that the existing specs work and things we need to add for the future specs. So I hope that that answered the question. But this is tremendous. So I'll end by once again reiterating the thanks. You've heard it a million times, but it really is true. We're thankful to all the folks who worked on this and to all of you for coming to see this call. We'll put the recording up on the IIIF Consortium YouTube channel. So if you know of peers and colleagues who would be interested in this, please do pass that link along. We'll add the link to that when it's available to the call notes. Yeah, and with that, thanks once again. Have a great day, and yeah, stay tuned for more on this front.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, Josh, for your wonderful facilitation.
Thanks, Mac. See you later.
Josh, can we export the chat? There's loads of useful links in there.
Yeah, I think the recording will handle it, but I'll do it just to double check. Thanks, Glenn.